Hey everybody, Dr. Dan here, and I will be your history professor for World History to 1500 this semester at the University of Toledo. So again, my name is Dr. Dan French. I go by Dr. Dan. You can call me whatever you'd like. And my contact information is daniel.french, F-R-E-N-C-H, at utoledo.edu. And my phone number is 419-345-7220. That's my cell phone. And you can call me or text me anytime, basically 24/7. Don't call me in the middle of the night, but you can text me if you want, if you have a question. So the key with me is keep the line of communication open. If you're going to be late with something, or you have an issue or a question, or you need help, just reach out anytime, and I'll take care of you. I try to get back to everybody fairly promptly. Sometimes on the weekends I might go a few hours, but generally I'm always available. So there's that part. As far as the course is concerned, this is a brand new course. It's not a brand new course for the University of Toledo. It's been on the books for a while. But I've redone it for this semester, and I'm really excited about it. So one of the things I did was I'm going with what we call an OER textbook, which means it's an open education resource, which means you don't have to pay anything for it. So I'm really fond of that. I'm all about lowering cost whenever we can. And I think that the book we've chosen is a good one. It was written by a number of history profs at the University of Georgia, and it's really well done. So, what you'll do there with this OER book, there's a link on the syllabus. There's a link on our Blackboard site. You'll click on the link and you'll download a PDF copy of the textbook, and I would download it. I think you can just continually read it online. I would download it if you can. If you're interested in taking highlights and writing notes, then it can all save to your computer. Not necessary. You can access it on your portable device too. So whatever works best for you. And if you do want to buy a printed copy, I believe there's one available when you go to the website to download the resource. But I wouldn't spend the money on it if you don't have to. It's pretty easy to read online. So that's the textbook. The other kind of cool thing, though, is that to get a feel for sort of the magnitude of the history we're covering here, world history to 1500 is a big thing because obviously it covers the whole world, and that's a really long period of time. It's actually more than 1500 years because we start before the Common Era. So, we talk about 300, 400, 500 before the Common Era, which is BCE. And so, you tack those on to the year 1500, we're actually covering 1800 to 2000 years. So it's something, we can't cover everything in a lot of depth when we're covering that much stuff. So we're going to gloss over with really broad strokes a lot of these histories. And but chapter 1 starts with the Neolithic and Paleolithic stuff. So that's really prehistory. And then chapter 2, we start to get into history with Mesopotamia and the Fertile Crescent. Actually, I think we're coming out of Africa first, and then we'll be moving into the Middle East as Homo sapiens, and that's where it starts. Those first 2 chapters. But if you go all the way to the end, the last chapter, and I don't know if it's 12, 13, or 14, but I do know if you go all the way to the end of the book, we end up in the Holy Roman Empire or Western Europe. In the 1400s, the end of the 1400s, and the cool thing to think about here, and I'm a historian of technology, so I look at things through a technological lens quite often. The cool thing to look at here is that that last chapter, in the 1400s, is when the printing press is invented by Gutenberg. So that's sort of the internet of that era, and the reason it's important is between the time or before the time of the printing press, there's no transfer of knowledge, okay? People are all pretty much illiterate. They don't read because there's really nothing to read unless it came from the church. The church, and by the church, basically I mean the Catholic Church in general in Western Europe, but we'll see it's a lot of other churches and religions as well, but it's really the church that holds the knowledge before the printing press came online, and then knowledge disseminated like crazy. But unfortunately for us, or fortunately, it's not that bad. Unfortunately for us, we don't get to study any of that. because at the end of our time period, that late 1400s, 1500 is when the press takes off, and then as the press takes off, you really get into the Reformation and sort of the era of Enlightenment and all of that stuff, which we're not going to talk about. So there's that, but there's a whole bunch that happens in between. So again, as maybe we look at history through our technology lens, the first maybe half of the book, if you will, those early days of human history, from say 200-300 before the Common Era to 800-900, somewhere in there, the big technology really was food production. As people dispersed throughout the globe and even into the Americas, the idea was food wins. In other words, populations can't grow, they can't get intelligent, they can't do anything unless they can reproduce, and to reproduce we need food, and to stay healthy we need food. So the early part of this history is really all about food production. And then really the second part of history is all about warfare and figuring out how to build weapons. That's sort of the irony in history. When bronze and iron casting, become invented, the first thing is agricultural equipment. How can we make a shovel that works? How can we make a plow that works? That's sort of the key thing for those inventions. But quickly thereafter is, hey, we have metal, we have brass, we have bronze. What kind of weapons can we make to wipe out the other guy? So, and I'll talk a little bit about my theory of history and bring that to light. But really, when you look at the period of history we're covering, people are either concerned with how are we going to raise enough food, and how are we going to build up weapons so we're protected and we're powerful. Kind of a sad commentary on human history if you think about it. Maybe we'll try to find some good things along the way too, but that's basically that's kind of basically the way it works, which gets me to Dr. Dan's theory of history. And so I just want to talk about it briefly. The way I feel about it, you may feel different, but history is definitely not a science. So the difference there is that in science you can reproduce results. So if someone says, hey, I figured out how to make water, here's how you do it. You take hydrogen, you take oxygen. Well, that can be reproduced reliably every time. In history, there is no reproduction of results. There is no predicting the future from the past. So there's a saying out there that history doesn't repeat itself, it rhymes. And I think that's true. And what that saying means is that history never repeats itself exactly. But in broad strokes, it rhymes. In other words, people love each other, then they hate each other, then they go to war. I mean, that has happened since Roman times, and it still happens today if you look at it in really broad strokes. So, the core of the way I look at history sometimes is that, we know humans have to be cooperative to survive. That's the way we evolved from the African savanna. People had to be cooperative and live in communities in order to raise children, in order to make sure everybody could eat, in order to make sure the elderly were taken care of, and in order to make sure that the very young were taken care of. So human beings need other people to survive. So we're kind of a cooperative social animal kind of group. Maybe that's why social media is so important. So humans always develop these relationships, and because we're generally confined to a region, we develop regional relationships over time. And those regional relationships are somehow, or not somehow, are sometimes called tribalism, if you've heard that word. We get together in tribes. It's sort of what we do. And when you get together in a tribe, there's always an us. And if there's an us, there always has to be a them, a not us. So if you think about history in those terms, you start to identify, who are these groups, and within these groups, who is the them? So who are they worried about? And so the first couple of chapters of the book are cool because it talks about this switch to agriculture societies. No longer are people hunters and gatherers, but now they become more settled with agriculture. And when that happens, now all of a sudden people have something to protect. If you form this agricultural society, now all of a sudden you have land, you have grain, you have tools. Now you have something that other people might want. So as soon as you build any kind of community with value, you have to build some sort of defense mechanism and that's where the weapons stuff starts to come in. Kind of an ugly part of the human condition, but if you study history, that's sort of the way it works. And sometimes they're not just fighting about food. Sometimes people are fighting about religion. So that pretty much dominates the textbook that we're going to be working on. We're going to be reading about the Crusades and all these religious battles because, the us and them can also be those of us who believe this way and those of us who believe that way. And so I'll try to point some of those things out as we go through these chapters and identify those people for you. But the book is really good, and it's free, which is cool. And it's I've been through it. It's an enjoyable read. It's not that difficult. And I'm taking way too long on this intro video. I apologize for that. Lastly, what I want to cover is how does it work? How does it all work? So obviously our course is online. It's on Blackboard. If you're listening to this, you're already there. And the way it works is every week you're going to cover a chapter. So every week we do a module, and every module covers one chapter. And every module is going to have an intro video like this one, only not this long, and it's going to be specific to the textbook. And so I'm going to give you an intro video every week, and then I'm going to give you my reading notes. So those are the notes I take when I'm reading the textbook. They highlight what's important. You still need to read the book, but I think this is a kind of a map to what you need to pay attention to. So you'll have reading notes every week. You'll have a to-do list. You'll have reading notes. You'll have the video. And then you'll also have an assignment. So typically it's a real easy quiz or it's a essay. So I don't generally use any discussion boards or anything like that. The essays are always very short. I mean, I had an essay last semester. I called it my mini essay, and the students only had to write 3 sentences. And a lot of people were upset by that because it's like, how are we learning from this? But you are learning from this. You write these long essays, and generally you kind of forget most of the stuff afterwards. So I try to keep our topics really focused, really narrow, so it's something that'll stick with you forever. So that's kind of cool. And, I use a rubric for all of my essays, so you have to follow the rubric to the letter. I'm always going to want in-text citations. They're not difficult. I'll show you how to do them. I'm always going to want certain points that you cover. And so if you can read a rubric and follow directions, you're going to be in great shape in this course. You won't have any issue. So I think I've covered everything. I gave you my contact information. I gave you sort of an overview of the course from the standpoint of what the textbook covers. And also I've given you a basic outline of the course structure with what to expect every week, from an intro video to a to-do list to reading notes to an assignment. And I think we should have a pretty good semester. The modules, they're always open, but we start a module on Monday and we always finish it by Sunday night. So if there's assignments due, you have to get them in by Sunday. Can you work ahead? I suppose you can work ahead. I prefer that you don't, because it kind of takes me out of my grading groove when I'm grading everybody at the same time. But if you have a need to work ahead, especially on 1 or 2 assignments because you need a week off for something, then you can always do that. So just, if you have any questions about any of that stuff, contact me. Again, sorry for going so long. It looks like I'm at 13 minutes, so I'll let you go. But again, welcome to class. I look forward to working with all you guys. Have a great day and have a great semester. Thanks.